Okay, we are here to start our Bible study now, so I would ask you to join me in prayer. Dear God, we give you thanks for this time that we've set apart to study your word. God, we ask that you will be with us in this study. We invite you to be in our presence. We ask that you guide me as I lead and guide our conversation, that we may learn of you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so Carol didn't hear the study last week, so I did assign homework. Does anybody have anything? We talked about the Noah's flood, and I asked you to look up. Who remembers what I asked you to look up?
Gilgamesh.
Gilgamesh. Anybody do any research on Gilgamesh?
I have some, but it didn't relate to the flood, so I'm hoping that someone else has.
There was a lot of other stuff besides Gilgamesh that, yes, but what did you find out?
This was Wikipedia. It said Gilgamesh is an epic poem from ancient Macedonia, regarded as the earliest surviving notable literature and the second oldest religious text after the pyramid text, which I found interesting. But then I was wondering why you asked it related to religion. So as I was reading, because there was tons of stuff, but I'm going to skip down where it said, why is the epic important to religion? And it said, we can use the epic of Gilgamesh to understand the religion, culture, and values of the people, their relationship between human beings and their deities, seen through their belief in anthropomorphism. How do I say that?
Anthropomorphism.
Thank you, which is the belief that gods take human form. Okay, next.
Okay, anybody else find anything about Gilgamesh?
I looked, that's what I saw in mine. I was on the same spot. So what she said, I saw.
What I had is that the Gilgamesh flood story, there are multiple gods, while in the Genesis, there's only one. It's because polytheism, I'm not sure what that word is.
Polytheism, that's multiple
Yes.
gods, multiple
And
gods.
while Genesis shows monotheism.
Okay,
But
so
there are two very similar stories featuring a warning from God and a hero building an ark.
okay. So where the origins of the story came, Gilgamesh had definitely had some influence on the story, but I did a little more research myself, and the big difference between Gilgamesh and this worldwide flood and collecting the animals was that the start of the flood in Gilgamesh story was very dismal, and the condemnation, and then the gods can do what the gods can do. And at the end of the story, Gilgamesh is still at the mercy of the gods, which are not pleasant, who can do whatever they want. And so it ends in misery. But the story of Noah is a story of God's wrath, but more about God's mercy. That God always has a plan of mercy. And it's not so much about that Noah was so good, but that God is merciful. Because God could have wiped everyone out, but God had this plan and decided, okay, I am going to always be on the side of mercy, even though I have the judgment. So Noah was in the center of God's mercy. So Gilgamesh was an ancient flood tale from Mesopotamia, which is older, predates the writing of the Bible, and may have had influence on the writers of the Bible as they were writing the story of Noah. So there's the flood story. And last week we ended with chapter 8, where God has said, I will never destroy every living thing as I have done. So reminding us that God, even though God is a God of judgment, a God of wrath, God is always a God of mercy. So we're starting now in chapter 9. So, and as we're remembering this, we've got this next chapter, we've talked about the J and the P sources, the J and the E and the P sources. So what can you tell me about these 3 sources that it's very apparent was used in the writing of Genesis? And everybody's looking for notes.
Well, they use God or Lord in a lot of the writings.
Okay, the different sources used a different word
Mhm.
when they referred to God. The Elohim, which were Yahweh, would have been the J source, and the P source used
Was
God.
priest.
I'm not sure which one was which, but the P was the priestly line, and the E was for Elohim, which was the Lord.
Mhm.
And I see
Then
Tom
what's,
joined us.
then
Maybe
what's Deuteronomy then? What they call them?
Deuteronomy is just the source that's used for Deuteronomy and more the law. So we don't have the D source in Genesis.
At all?
No,
Okay.
no D source in Genesis. I could be corrected. As I said, I'm not a biblical scholar. I try to keep a chapter ahead of you, but I'm pretty sure that there's no D sources in Genesis. That's
Okay.
that's why it's called Deuteronomy, the law part.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Hello there.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm
Okay.
a little late. Tom's at a Legion meeting, so it's just me.
Oh, there you are in the
and we're
flesh.
just
can
doing
see
review,
you.
but so you'll be right where we need to be. We haven't started the new stuff yet.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got the flood story going on. We find out that so God is this merciful God, and in the story of the flood, these different sources through the oral traditions have been kind of intermingled in different ways, and so sometimes it seems like the story doesn't quite make sense because they're just putting these sources together. And we have in the chapter 9, it's not so clearly divided, but this is a story to remember. This came from oral tradition. And we always put you in that mode of sitting around the fire in the evenings and this primitive people sharing the stories, which doesn't mean they're not true, but they were the stories of their beginning. So now we are on chapter 9, and this is going to be a little bit of a wild ride. Now we had the wildest story of all with the Nephilim in chapter 6, which we don't quite know what they were, whether they were angels, whether they were just reference to the sons, the descendants of Cain and the descendants of Seth intermarrying. But there were heroes of old, or superheroes, or demigods that other cultures would have had. But that was there. But now we've got this really kind of strange story coming up in chapter 9, but not for a little bit. So who would like to read the easier part?
I'll read the easy part.
Okay, Nancy, start with chapter 9 and go through verse 11.
Oh, wow. Okay. Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall upon all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the air, upon every creature that moves along the ground and upon all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood, I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting from every animal. And from each man, too, I will demand an accounting for the life of his fellow man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made man.
Okay, I want to stop there. I just want to stop there. Now, is this the before this, what did people eat? What were they given the first couple of
Plants.
chapters of Genesis?
Plants.
They were given only the plants to eat
Yeah.
before this. But we know that God killed an animal for Adam and Eve's clothing. So there was the death of animal, but before this, now the animals are given, and there's definitely a divide. We have human beings made in God's image where there will be an accounting, but now people are now given the animals to eat, and there's this fear that sets in. So as we're looking, sitting around the fire, and you wonder why the animals run away from you, now you know why. Because this is the story of creation and how things came to be. So the animals run away, unless you're a deer in Buffalo. They're not afraid of anybody.
Yeah.
I can walk within about 3 feet of a deer in my backyard, and as long as that I don't spoo, they just stand there looking at me going, you can't shoot me here. They know it. Anyway, but animals, and I've heard people that have gone to the Galapagos Islands, that the animals have no fear of people there because they're all protected there, and there's never any harm to the animals, and it's just people are unknown to them. So anyway, just a little sidelight. But this is an explanation of how the world is. God said, okay, and it's an explanation. Why did that explanation have to be added to this story about how the animals now feared humans?
Because, well, the first murder was between Cain and Abel. Was that why?
No, I'm talking specifically about the fear, because it said in verse 2, the animals will fear you and dread you.
Well, they had
Well, I
just all
wasn't
lived
here for
together
last, oh,
for a
go
year.
ahead.
They had just all lived together on the ark for a year.
I was gonna say,
So apparently they weren't afraid of the people feeding them on the ark.
Right. And how
Mhm.
could Noah have possibly gathered all those animals together if in his timeline, if they were all afraid, he would have had to capture them all? So, I mean, they're going, so you have to hear the whole story, because if you're an 8-year-old, you're going to see that and say, wait, no, how could Noah collect all these animals if they're all afraid of us now? So here's the story. This is what happened. God made the animals afraid. Now, and what now in verse 6, we see now that it's okay to kill the animals. Except for what? What can't you do?
Take another human's life.
Okay, but the animals, you can't eat it with the blood in it.
Oh, and right.
This is a Hebrew law because the blood was representing life. So the life has to be drained out of the animal before you can eat it. Because you can't eat life. Because life is precious to God no matter how it is. All right, so now verse 6. What is special about humans?
they're made in the image of God.
Okay. You can't kill another human. Is this where our laws of murder and justice and capital punishment, is this a justification for that?
Sure sounds like it.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Or is it God saying, I demand? Because you're made in my image. It puts a very higher rank on human beings than animal life.
But if you're taking it literally, like Kay said, then it almost seems like that's what he's saying. You know,
Yeah.
that's where it all started.
Mm-hmm.
It tells us how valuable human life is. and that animal life is also valuable because you can eat it, but you can't eat it while it's still alive, while the life is still there. Life to God is precious. So let's go on. Let's go from 7 through 11. Yeah,
I keep going.
yeah, please.
As for you, be fruitful and increase in number, multiply on the earth and increase upon it. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth.
Okay, so we see, what do you see in there with God and the value of all creation?
I guess I don't know what you mean. I mean, he's going to make a covenant. He values all creation.
He values all creation. He doesn't value he values human beings, saying you don't kill each other because your life, your blood needs to be shed. If you shed somebody else's blood, don't go killing each other. But God is just saying how valuable all of creation is. And his covenant is not just with human beings, but with all creation. All of the animals, all the fish, all the birds. Let's go 12 through 17, because here's your favorite part, I'm sure.
I can read.
Thank you.
As a sign of this everlasting covenant, which I am making with you and with all living beings, I am putting my bow in the clouds. It will be the sign of my covenant with the world. Whenever I cover the sky with clouds and the rainbow appears, I will remember my promise to you and to all the animals that a flood will never again destroy all living beings. When the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between me and all living beings on earth. That is the sign of the promise which I am making to all living beings.
Okay. How many of you like rainbows?
I do.
Somebody tell me about the most beautiful rainbow you've ever seen.
Oh, you were frozen for a minute. Can you ask the question again?
Tell me about the most beautiful rainbow you've ever seen.
Well,
A
when we
double-
were,
No,
A
you-
double rainbow.
we were in, all of us were on Pine Hill at my niece's house, Sarah and Dave's, and it rained and we saw this beautiful rainbow. And it looked like the end of it was right over Mom and Dad's house. It was just this incredible, and Kathy actually took a picture of it. It was just beautiful.
And it was just after Mom passed. So it
Wow.
was really special.
Wow.
Mhm.
We've seen, I guess the most beautiful ones we've seen are over the Atlantic when we're at the beach down south. We saw a double one.
Clara, you were saying something. It was.
Oh, I was gonna say the most beautiful are the double ones,
Yes.
I think.
Has anybody ever seen a rainbow? I mean, Kathy and Mary just talked about this one just after their mom passed. Anyone see a rainbow at a significant time in your life? Did you?
Can't think.
Do you ever see a rainbow during a storm? It always seems it's after a storm and then everything's just peaceful.
Yeah, that's kind of, there has to be sun to make the rainbow. I saw a rainbow when I was just at the absolute frustration point of trying to sell our old house. I just thought, are we ever going to get it sold? And there was a rainbow, right? Just unexpectedly. Because sometimes, oh, this is rainbow weather. You go out and look for it because it's just the right time of day. But there it was. And it was just. Do you think we would still feel the same way about the rainbow if it wasn't, we didn't connect it with God's promise to Noah?
I would probably recognize its beauty, but there's just something special about seeing it because we know that it's a covenant sign, I think.
Makes sense. So this whole story, so let's go back to the campfire. And after the flood, that's when God first put the rainbow in the sky as a sign of God's promise and covenant. And we all go, oh yeah, of course it is. Of course that's a sign of God's covenant. We can all see it because it's so beautiful. And God sets that in the sky. So there's the story. We've got the rainbow now as God's covenant with not just human beings, but with all of creation. That I am a God of mercy. And no matter how mad I get at you because you are just really rotten people sometime, I'm going to see that rainbow and remember I promised and remember that I'm merciful. It's a sign to help me remember God's saying. So that's pretty cool. That when we think of the story of Gilgamesh, when Gilgamesh realizes he is just a pawn of God and there's nothing he can do and the gods can just do whatever he want whenever they want. And we have this God of all the universe who says, reminding myself to be merciful to you. And that is just the coolest thing.
It is.
Okay, now that was the easy part. Now, who wants to read
Nobody.
the next part of the story through verse 25?
Starting with what?
This is chapter 9, verse 18.
I'll try it. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. These were the three sons of Noah, and from them came the people who were scattered over the earth. Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked in backward and covered their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned the other way so that they would not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine and found out what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will be to his brothers. The lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers." He also
Okay.
said,
Okay, and then we go on. Go ahead, you can finish the chapter, Dottie.
"Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May God extend the territory of Japheth. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his slave." After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. Altogether, Noah lived 950 years, and then he died.
Okay. I'm going to let you wrestle with that before I jump in with anything. So what's the meaning of this wild story?
I've always thought was that one son was disrespectful to his father and the other two showed respect by covering their father.
Okay. Anybody else here and have any hearing thoughts on this one? Okay, this story in the Bible is perhaps the most damaging story of all the stories in the Bible.
Hmm.
So we'll talk about why. And I heard this when I was a young woman. I don't think I was married yet when I heard a radio broadcast about this, and I was shocked. But since then I have learned more and am still shocked and horrified. So first of all, we see that Noah maybe wasn't all so good. If he can get drunk and put himself out there in this place maybe where he shouldn't have been, which reminds us about God's mercy in the first place. That God was merciful even though Noah was not a perfect person. And I have heard stories that people say that Ham was a homosexual act, and that was hidden in this story. And that's why it was so terrible. But I found no other experts that think about that. So there was some reason that this story was in here.
Well, does it have anything to do with him telling everybody that this is I mean, he saw it, but then he told his brothers. Is that part of it?
We really don't know, and there's no explanation as to what the terrible thing that Ham had done. But see, the part that's going to come in the next chapter is the part that brings the damaging part, because we're going to read that and it's going to be meaningless to us because it's all these names. But the names that this wasn't actually, it was more like the tribes of the earth. So I did find this particularly. So here's one commentary on this, that these names that were listed in the genealogy in the next chapter weren't as much names as they were the names of different cultures and different tribes. So someone in this commentary said this, it is to this Bruce Vaughters. He made a neat analogy. So he says these genealogy that we're going to read in the next chapter is more like this. The descendants of Europe were Britain, France, Spain. Britain became the father to America, Canada. To Spain also children were born, California and Mexico. The descendants of America, Virginia, Georgia, Carolina. Georgia became the father of Atlanta, Augusta, Savannah, and so forth. So this is not so much an origin of individual people as the origins of tribes and cultures. And that's so accredited to Shem are all of the Semitic tribes, of which Israel was one. So they were the good ones. And attributed to Japheth were the ones that were in the north, who didn't necessarily, I mean, they eventually came into the tents of Shem, so they became good. But the descendants of Ham were then the ones that came from Africa, who, and the Egypt, of course, they didn't have the whole continent of Africa concept at this point in history, but they were the darker skinned. They were the ones that were really huge rivals with the Semitic tribes that eventually became the Hebrews and the Israelites. So this is one way to explain why they were such enemies of these other tribes. So while the commentary I was reading said, so did they write it down because it gave an explanation to say, and this is why we should hate those people. Because God cursed them. So now let's take it into our day. So if God cursed Ham, who it's attributed to him now, the Africans, then we have every right, we as good people of the north from either Japheth or Shem have every right to enslave Africans. This story is the basis of white supremacy.
Oh,
Whoa.
Yeah, I told you this was a very, and I heard this as a young person about, it was someone from the KKK was on this radio broadcast talking about, and it's in the Bible, and God cursed Ham, and what did he do? He turned him black. So we have every right to enslave the Africans because they were cursed by God.
Well, this is just a theory.
This is the reason that the white supremacists, because the KKK has always been from the start, they claim to be biblically based. That's why they burn crosses.
I don't see, I fail to see how you can connect all this.
That is what they use this story. It is the root of the KKK and the white supremacist movement. Because it's been taken out of the context, and this is what they say, this is why. So I told you this story is the most damaging story in the whole Bible, because they've
Wow.
taken that one story out of context and they've used that as justification for racism.
Wow.
But it's sure, to me, it's really stretching the,
I know,
taking out of
I know.
context.
Yeah.
Wow.
You can look it up. This is not my idea.
Okay.
This is definitely one, but this was, why is this story in the Bible? We don't really know. It's mostly to explain to the people that are listening to this why we fight with those people, because it's from when God cursed them. And is that the intention of God in this story? Or is it the intention of the one who wrote it?
Well, I don't ever think it's the intention of God to have racial prejudice at all. You know, we're supposed to love everybody. So I'm still not quite sure about this story.
Yeah, this story, it's in there and we have to wrestle with it.
Okay.
And that's why I always say when I'm teaching anything from the Bible, that it's important that we read the whole Bible, that we don't pick and choose which stories we're going to take out. Why we read, because we're seeing this God is the God of mercy for all creation and all animals. Then there's this weird story in here maybe it's included to help the people of that day say why it's okay to have these wars that we're against. But then people have taken it out and they've used it to harm other parts of God's beautiful creation. And just like when we studied Revelation, we can't pick and choose this and say, well, this is what this is going to be, and this is what this is going to be. We have to look at the whole story of Revelation to see what the message is, that God it's a book of hope. And once again, this story is one that is misused because we don't read the whole of the story and don't see God's message of hope and mercy.
Okay. Because we do know that a lot of people just pull out bits and pieces and are always, using it for evil, I think,
There's an awful lot of that.
Mhm.
An awful lot of taking out a verse out of context, a verse a story. And this is the origins, and this is the origins of the evilness in the hearts of humans.
Hmm.
That God is a God of mercy. God saved Noah because Noah was so good, was righteous. And yet we find out that Noah wasn't also good. And then something happened with his sons that just sent them all a tither. And now there's wars on earth because there's this curse of God, and it just something we have to wrestle with. But God didn't put a curse on a particular group of people. He put it on Ham. But do you remember back in the days when we were reading about Cain and how Cain killed his brother?
Mhm.
And what did God do for Cain?
He still showed mercy because he put that mark on him so no one would kill him.
So God, even in God's punishment, showed mercy.
Mhm.
So this story that God cursed this race of people just doesn't make sense with the whole person that we know God is, the whole personhood of God, the whole merciful God. So there's something we don't understand within the story, just like the Nephilim, that nobody's really got a good answer for. We don't know. There are just some things in the Bible that we just don't understand at this point. But once again, looking at the entirety of the Bible and the message of God's hope and God being a God of mercy from the very beginning. And that doesn't fit with God being merciful. What other explanations can you see about this story?
Mean to say that doesn't fit with God being merciful?
That God would curse Ham and turn him into the African nation that we're allowed to enslave if we're not dark skinned.
Yeah, okay.
That doesn't sound like God.
I
Seems like-
still think there's something to be said for Ham being disrespectful to his father, and that the other two were respectful, backed their way in and covered their father up. And
Mhm.
It
Yeah,
doesn't seem like that was that big of a deal to condemn one of the sons in his nation, to be slaves. And I don't know, just seems like
It
He
wasn't
walked in-
him. It's the son that was the one that was punished.
yeah. Noah was never condemned. It was the son that was condemned.
is that because that was just part of the generations that came from Ham? So he was condemning all of the offspring of Ham?
That's
Because Canaan didn't really do anything.
we don't know. Some things in the Bible, we
It
can't
seems like
understand everything that's there. So I'd like you to go, and that will be your homework for this week, to see if you can find anything. Because I've done my research, I've done my book, and I'm coming up short. So I'll do some more research this week, but I'm going to ask you to also look up to see the cursing of Ham, to see what you can come up with, to see if we can make more sense of this story. But we know it is not there to condemn a race of people to slavery to our day. And it does not give anyone the right to be a white supremacist. We know that is not the right interpretation.
Okay, a resounding amen to that.
Yeah,
Yes.
but if you start researching it, you'll find out, you'll read that part. So let's leave that there. And sometimes we can just say, not quite sure about this, just like the Nephilim, not sure about that. But we can wrestle with it and we can say, okay, God, show me some meaning to this. Show me where and what is the meaning for that.
Does anybody know anybody in the KKK that could help explain why they think it's?
Oh, dear.
I mean, there's
I
not
hope I
much-
don't.
unless there's a lot more to the story. It's a pretty short story to base the whole philosophy of whatever on.
It sure is.
Somebody walked in and saw their dad naked. That doesn't seem like that's a big deal. So
Well,
they must interpret and found something somewhere else to give their justification, more justification, I guess. I don't know.
no, that's pretty big.
But it's interesting though, because it would be maybe just a few people who interpreted it that way and people just started following and have no idea what they're following or why they're following.
Right.
I think it was the other way around, that there were people that just wanted to dislike and enslave Africans because they were different. And they said, okay, what justification can we find to do this? And, oh, look at this story in the Bible. So I don't think it came from, oh, look at this story in the Bible, we should go enslave them. It's we're enslaving them. Let's find some justification in this story fit.
There's throughout time, there's been people as slaves, and they weren't all from Africa.
No. No,
So
there was a lot of when we get into the later books in the Pentateuch about how to treat your slaves. But nowhere in history has it been because of your looks. It's because they were enslaved because they happened to be poor, or they were enslaved because they happened to be in a slave group. But it wasn't, or you're captured in war. But no place in history has it been, I mean, since basically the invasion of the Americas that started slavery with the Africans and the Native Americans.
But Africans enslaved Africans too.
Right. Yes, they did. But that was more of an act of war and other things. It wasn't because of just simply because of the skin color.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's some homework for you to look through this week. And I want to just read through chapter 10, and you can, someone who's very brave, since there are names, just say them loud and with confidence. And remember the one name, just pick out, listen to what Nimrod is. Watch Nimrod, but the rest of it, we're just going to go through 10 so somebody can start and we'll just, so we can say we got through this.
I'll start it and then I'll turn
Okay.
it over to someone. Okay, this is the account of the families of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the three sons of Noah. Many children were born to them after the great flood. Descendants of Japheth. The descendants of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshes, and Tyrus. The descendants of Gomer, sorry, I'm thinking of Gomer Pyle.
I know.
The descendants of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Ribath, and Togarmah. The descendants of Yavan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Rodanim. Their descendants became the seafaring peoples that spread out to various lands, each identified by its own language, clan, and national identity. Okay, someone else.
You got through Japheth's sons. Now remember, this is like what that passage I read you about how Britain birthed these different, Europe was the father of England and France, and this is kind of the same idea that these are cities and places and peoples. Okay, so someone go on from verse 6 and read the descendants of Ham.
The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Libya, and Canaan were the ancestors of the peoples who bear their names. The descendants of Cush were the people of Seba, Havilah, Septa, Rama, and Septica. The descendants of the Rama were the people of Sheba and Dedan. Cush had a son named Nimrod, who became the world's first great conqueror. By the Lord's help, he was a great hunter, and that is why people say, may the Lord make you as great a hunter as Nimrod. At first, his kingdom included Babylon, Erech, and Akkad, all three of them in Babylonia. From that land, he went to Assyria and built the cities of Nineveh, Rehoboth, I thought that was Junior at first, Kala, and Rezin, which is between Nineveh and the great city of Kala. I'm done.
I'm going to read verse 13 and 14. Egypt fathered Lidam, Anamim, Lahibim, Nephatuim, Pathrashim, Caslahim, and Captorim, from which the Philistines came, because that was the end of Ham. All right, so the Ham, yeah, okay. And now on we go. Canaan. Verse 15 through 20, the next round.
Hey, Susie, it's your turn.
Canaan's oldest son was Sidon, the ancestor of the Sidonians. Canaan was also the ancestor of the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Arkites, Sinites, Arvidites, Samaritas, and Hamathites. The Canaanite clans eventually spread out, and the territory of Canaan extended from Sidon in the north to Gera and Gaza in the south, and east as far as Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zebonium near Lasha. These were the descendants of Ham, identified by clan, language, territory, and national identity.
Okay, can you see in that list? Well, if you think about a lot of those names we hear later on about as enemies of Israel. The land of Canaan, but the Canaanites, we've got Sodom and Gomorrah in there. Okay, those are all descendants of Ham.
That Havilah that's in the Fiddler on the Roof. One of the daughters' name is Havilah. Doesn't matter, except for I like that musical. So
How did you remember that?
Okay, so now we've got started at 21 and we're going to do the children of Shem. So who wants to be brave with Shem? You're doing a great job on these.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Are you kidding?
Go ahead, Carol, you can read it.
Oh. Sons were also born to Shem, whose older brother was Japheth. Shem was the ancestor of all the sons of Eber. The sons of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram, Uz, Hul, Gether, and Meshach. Arphaxad was the father of Shelah, and Shelah the father of Eber. Two sons were born to Eber. One was named Peleg, because in his time the earth was divided. His brother was named Joktan. Joktan was the father of Almadad, Shalab. I'm sorry. Hazar, and Havilah. And Jobab. All these were sons of Joktan. The region where they lived stretched from Mesha towards Sephar in the eastern hill countries. These are the sons of Shem by their clans and languages in their territories and nations. These are the clans of Noah's sons, according to their lines of descent within their nations. From these, the nations spread out over the earth after the flood.
Okay.
I ended victoriously.
You did it. You did. You
Good
did.
job.
We got through it.
It's fine. All right, so now we can see, did you see any heir of condemnation of Ham's son in this chapter?
Say that again.
You said
this
any
chapter.
heir of condemnation as they're listing all these people that have descended. Do you see anything different in the listing of Ham than you do from Shem and Japheth?
No.
No.
No,
I
we
don't think
see
so.
difficult cities, but we've got Nimrod, the mighty warrior. And it just seems like that story about Ham was just kind of there, and now we're going on.
Mhm.
And here's the Ham, and this is now where the worlds came from, because everybody else was gone but Noah and his sons. So obviously the whole world had to come from there, and here they all are. Here's where all the nations of the world came from, and just a listing of them. So it seems that that curse of Ham was just that little story there, and now just gives an explanation about why there are different kind of people and why we fight with different ones over different things.
You know, if you were sitting around a campfire telling the story, how would you ever remember all those names?
Okay,
Right.
you're looking it through a Boy Scout who was telling the story of, did you bring the important papers? Anybody know that story? And
No,
the story is they come running in with a roll of toilet paper.
of course.
But but we're not looking at it through the eyes of this Eastern people that made sure they drilled in exactly that you tell the story, you become the storyteller, you become the historian, and your stories have to be accurate. And it's not the same as us just coming by a story that I'm going to sit and tell a story. It's a whole different culture to make sure they get everything exactly right. And it was that great honor, and that the elders, the respect for the elders who had the stories, who make sure that the next generation gets it exactly correct. So it's not, when I use that term campfire, for us, it's fun, you're on vacation, but no, the campfire, that was the religion, that was the center of their whole life. So yeah, they would have learned all of them, and all of these names. It would be like when I read you from that commentary about Europe, birth, England, France. These are all names we remember. We know exactly what they're talking about. This would have been the same thing for this, because they would have known all these tribes and all these nations that are around. So they would have recognized the names. It's not the gibberish it seems like to us.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I love that. Remember last week when I said for my study Bible that it said the genealogies point out that people are important to God.
Yeah.
And that's how I keep remembering it, saying,
Yeah. I like that.
okay, that's why all these names are in there, because every person is important.
Well, and
Done any research? Oh, go ahead, Carol.
I was just going to say, you know, when I swim, the first time I swim each week, it's a prayer swim. I try to make it a prayer swim, and 64 lengths is a mile. I can usually get 48. Well, there are 48 names in my immediate family. When I start with myself and my husband and my kids and their kids, and then God forbid, Diane and her kids and all of their kids, you know, and then I go through Dwayne and his family, and then Wayne's brother, and then his family and all those kids. And somebody said, well, how do you remember all those names? I thought, well, because they're my family. I mean, I don't have any problem remembering all those names because I know them. And so that's what this makes me think of, is that they could recite these names without even thinking about it, because they've heard them for so long. They have a relationship to them because they're a part of one of those or another tribes. You know, anyway, when I do that prayer swim, I pray for each person on one length, and that's how I keep track of how many lengths I've done, how far I've been. But
That's cool.
with this,
Oh, I love that.
pardon
That's
me,
neat. I love
Yeah.
that. That's really neat.
well,
Yeah.
it gives me a chance to pray, and it gives me, it helps me. It's much more interesting than going 1, two, three. Wait, where am I? But my point is that they, I don't have any problem remembering those names because I have a relationship with those names. And I know
Right.
them. And that's what I'm thinking here is that they're sitting around the campfire and they're recalling. Maybe one person didn't record all these names around the campfire, maybe one of the tribes of one of these sons said, well, here were the people from my tribe. And the next one said, well, here were the people from my tribe. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's when you have a relationship with them, you
Yeah.
remember them. I was just going to ask how many of you have done any research in your genealogy? And you get the last names of all of these different people. Who I could tell you a whole bunch of different last names in my family that would be meaningless to you.
Right.
But they're not to me because they're people that are related to me, just as Carol said. They will remember them.
Sorry. Well, and if we were to do that in this group, if we were to say, who are all the people that are affected by this Bible study? It's going to be every member of our family in one way or another, because we're together. Does that make sense? So I would record the names of the family members that I know, and Nancy would record all of her family members. I might not be able to do that, but she could do that, and you would be able to record. And that's what I'm thinking with all these names that we can't pronounce.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think that helps us a lot to see about it's not just gibberish and why they could remember them and why they carried them down, because it's
Right.
part of their history. Yeah. Yeah, I knew a man once who said, and some of his last name was Brown. He was from, another one of the Browns, and he lived
There's a lot of Browns.
Blockville, New York. And he said, and also he was related to people called the Buttons, and there's a lot of family of Buttons. And also there was another family, and this is a true story, and there was another part of his family that were the Sads. They just their last name. So when they had a family reunion, it was the Sad Brown Button.
Yeah, there you go. I saw that
Isn't it
coming.
almost 8
Yeah.
o'clock? I think it's almost 8 o'clock, isn't it? Isn't it almost 8 o'clock?
That really is true. But there we go. We have it. And and one of the things that I do when I do pre-marriage counseling is I have families, I have the husband and the wife draw out their genealogy as far as they know it can go.
Wow.
Because, and sometimes, they only get to a grandparent. A lot of times they'll get to great grandparents, and they have to tell each other their family history, their story, because you begin to see families and you see things in families, like you'll see an alcoholic that's here in this family, or you'll see there was a divorce here and there was this that happened with it, or this one we're not speaking to. And it's amazing once you start talking about these family histories, how much that opens up who the person is themselves. I had one that this woman was marrying a farmer, and she was moving into the family homestead, and he had 4 brothers that all lived right there on the farm. And, they were just much in love. And I said, now, what would happen if your wife disagreed with something that your brothers wanted to do? Who would you listen to? And there was a pause. And there was a lot of tears that day.
You were trying to break them up, weren't you?
I was not trying to break them up, but I could see, but it helped them so much, because before they made that tie, it allowed them to talk about this. It allowed them to see and to process this before something came up. And that was one where a lot of times mothers will come to me at the wedding and they'll say, my daughter just really didn't want to go to your pre-marriage counseling sessions. And she said, and she was so glad afterwards.
Mhm.
Because I tried to make them cry every time. I did. Mostly because I really wanted them to really get to the deep stuff before they encountered it, when they were still really motivated to work on it before they got married. And as far as I know, everybody that I've married is still married except one couple, which I was really didn't think they were going to make it because they were so much in love that they couldn't. I asked them how they fought, and they said, "Oh, we never fight." I thought, "Oh, that's not going to be good."
Not gonna be good.
They were the only couple that I know that got divorced
Mhm.
because,
Yep.
yeah. So anyway, sideline. I'm telling my stuff, but so we've got the family histories. We've got this weird story of Ham and Noah that you're all going to research and see what else we can bring into it. We've got that reminder that the Bible isn't just one particular verse here and there, that the Bible is the whole story, and we need to see the whole story and God's hand in everything all the way through. And just a reminder with this story. So do you have any questions or comments before we close up for tonight? Okay, and I will put last week's and this week's up. So,
Thank you.
so I know that there's a few that watch this every week that aren't here ever. So, okay, well, we'll say good night then.